4. This is Today in L.A.
Thank you, Carl. Time is 7:17. Bloody confrontation turning into a test of endurance now as the standoff in Egypt spills into week 3. The Islamic fundamentalist group, the Muslim Brotherhood, is one of several groups that has now reportedly met with the government. Joining us this morning with his perspective on what all of this means for Israel is Rabbi Marvin Hier. He's dean and founder of the Simon Wiesenthal Center Museum of Tolerance in Los Angeles, also a 2-time Oscar winner. Rabbi, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Let's talk about the Muslim Brotherhood first, which has a long record of antagonism toward Israel. But some say that because it has renounced violence, because it has participated in elections in Egypt, it's not quite the boogeyman that some in the West have made it out to be. Your perspective?
Well, first let me say, democracy, theoretically, it would be wonderful. Democracy takes hold in Egypt, the largest Arab country, the most influential Arab country. The ripple effect that can have in Iran, in Syria, in Yemen, all over the Middle East. So it sounds wonderful. What are some of the problems? The Muslim Brotherhood. For example, in 2010, October 2010, the spiritual guide of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt said this. He said that they crucially need to understand that the improvement and change that the nation seeks can only be attained through jihad and sacrifice, and by raising a jihadi generation that pursues death just as the enemies pursue life. Now, what's frightening about that is, yes, I know they said they're not going to run in this election. They're very shrewd. Let's remember that Nasrallah, when he started, was a nobody. Today, Nasrallah controls Lebanon. They start very slow, and they say that we don't have any political intentions at all, but they have a jihadi philosophy that reveres death and not life.
But some say the Brotherhood is more diverse than that there are folks in the Brotherhood that even support a two-state solution as far as Israel and the Palestinians are concerned. So which one are we to believe?
Look, Ariel Sharon withdrew unilaterally from Gaza, and his hopes were that at that time that the Palestinian people would not opt for an extremist government. Instead, they elected Hamas. So the fear here is, just like you have in the Middle East, in Israel, just like Nasrallah came from nowhere to be the kingmaker in Lebanon, the Muslim Brotherhood, if we don't watch it, and if democracy doesn't really take hold there, could one day wind up, not today, not tomorrow, maybe in 5 years, could wind up taking over Egypt. And then the whole region would just be going to the extreme. That's what Israelis are concerned about. But theoretically, democracy is wonderful.
Well, should not Israel, as the shining example of democracy in the Middle East, in principle, even if the consequences are what you described, be supporting democracy?
Absolutely. And Israel, the comments made by Prime Minister Netanyahu is that if it's going to be a full-fledged democracy, it can only be good for the Middle East. But a full-fledged democracy means the following. You can't hide from 80 million people Israel's view on how the conflict began. It means that television and radio stations have to have the Israeli point of view regularly, just the way in the United States. You want to criticize the Obama administration? It's done every single day. Previously, the Bush administration criticized every single day. If you open Haaretz newspaper in Israel, every day you will see criticism against the Netanyahu government. That kind of democracy would be great in Egypt.
You've spoken recently with the Prime Minister, Netanyahu. Some argue, including Tom Friedman at the New York Times, that now is the time to pressure the Palestinians and for Israel to step up as far as making a peace deal and a peace settlement. What do you think?
Well, I think that Israel, we have to look at the reality. Israel is willing to compromise in a major way in the West Bank. But let's remember, Israel's dealing with a very weak Palestinian president who, in the last 5 years, has not been permitted by his own people to visit Gaza, because Gaza, the most populous city, is under control of Hamas. So when the world says, let's lean on Israel, let's face facts. The Palestinians do not have a strong leader that is acceptable by his own people. With who is Israel going to make all these compromises? So when you put forth a plan where the Arab world finally says, you know what, we're going to do something about Hamas and Hezbollah, I can assure you Israel will be there to compromise.
And reinstate a settlement freeze?
And reinstate remove and move out of the West Bank, of a large portion of the West Bank, in return for no Hamas and no Hezbollah.
All right. Still to come. Thank you, Rabbi Marvin Hier. Thank you so much for coming in. We appreciate it. Andy?